Boaz did not call Ruth with the authority of a master, but with the kindness of a man who had learned that strength is revealed in mercy. "My daughter," he said, "listen to me. Do not go and glean in another field or leave this one. Stay here with my young women. Keep your eyes on the field they are harvesting and follow after them. I have instructed the young men not to touch you. Whenever you are thirsty, go and drink from the jars the men have filled." For a moment, Ruth simply looked at him. His words were unexpected. She was a foreigner, a widow, a woman with no family standing, no land, and no influence. She had come hoping only to gather forgotten stalks of barley, yet she was being offered protection, dignity, and welcome. Deeply moved, she bowed low before him. "Why have I found such favor in your eyes," she asked, "that you should notice me, since I am a foreigner?" Boaz's answer revealed that he had already heard her story. "I have been told all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and the land of your birth, and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Those final words lingered in the warm afternoon air. "Under whose wings you have come to take refuge." The image was familiar in the poetry of Israel. Like a mother bird spreading her wings over vulnerable chicks, God was described as the one who sheltered those who trusted him. Ruth had crossed borders and left behind everything familiar, but Boaz recognized something deeper than courage. He saw faith. Ruth thanked him quietly and returned to her work. The hours passed beneath the brilliant spring sky. Larks sang above the fields, while the scent of crushed barley drifted on the breeze. Reapers moved steadily through the golden grain, their sickles flashing in the sunlight. When the time came for the midday meal, Boaz surprised her once again. "Come here," he said, "have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar." The invitation was extraordinary. Meals in the ancient world often reflected social boundaries. A poor foreign widow from Moab would not normally sit among the landowner's workers, yet Boaz made room for her at the table. Ruth sat quietly beside the harvesters. Fresh bread was passed from hand to hand. Roasted grain crackled gently over the fire before being shared. Cool drink eased the thirst brought by hours beneath the sun. The scriptures record a simple but beautiful detail. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. For people who had recently known hunger, those words carried great meaning. Perhaps before standing again, Ruth carefully wrapped the remaining food in a piece of cloth. Naomi would need supper. Even while receiving kindness, Ruth continued thinking of someone else. As she returned to gleaning, Boaz quietly spoke to his young men. "Let her gather even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. Pull out some stalks from the bundles for her, and leave them for her to pick up. Do not rebuke her." His generosity remained almost hidden. He did not announce it before everyone. He simply instructed his workers to make the path easier for someone who had already suffered enough. So the field became unexpectedly fruitful. Where Ruth expected to find only scattered leftovers, full heads of barley seemed to appear before her. She continued gathering until the shadows began to lengthen across the hills. When evening came, she beat out the grain she had collected. The pile beside her was astonishing. About an ephah of barley, enough to provide food for many days. Balancing the heavy sack upon her shoulders, Ruth began the walk back toward Bethlehem. The road climbed gently through vineyards glowing in the golden light of sunset. Larks darted across the sky, and the first cool breeze of evening softened the heat of the day. Naomi looked up as Ruth entered the house. For a brief moment, she simply stared. No one expected a gleaner to return with so much grain. Then Ruth unwrapped the bread she had saved from the meal and placed it before her. Naomi's eyes widened. "Where did you glean today?" she asked. "Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." Ruth smiled, perhaps for the first time in many months. "The name of the man with whom I worked today is Boaz." Silence filled the little house. Naomi knew that name very well. A memory long buried beneath grief suddenly came alive. Boaz was not merely a generous landowner. He was a close relative of Elimelech's family, a man who, according to the customs of Israel, belonged to the circle of relatives who could redeem the inheritance of a deceased family member. Naomi whispered with quiet amazement, "The Lord bless him. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead." For the first time since returning to Bethlehem, hope entered the house. It came quietly, not through a miracle that split the sea, not through fire from heaven, but through an ordinary day's work in a barley field, and through the unnoticed faithfulness of people who chose compassion over indifference. Neither Naomi nor Ruth could see where this path would lead, but the God who had guided one widow to the right field was already preparing the next chapter of their story. The days settled into a gentle rhythm. Each morning, before the first rays of sunlight touched the hills of Bethlehem, Ruth wrapped her cloak around her shoulders and walked once more toward the fields of Boaz. The air was cool and fragrant with wildflowers that bloomed between the stone paths. Dew clung to the barley, sparkling like countless tiny jewels before disappearing beneath the warmth of the rising sun. Harvest was never quiet. The steady sweep of sickles, the laughter of workers, the creak of wooden carts, and the rustle of grain filled the valleys from dawn until evening. Birds circled overhead in search of scattered seeds, while shepherds watched their flocks on distant hillsides. Day after day, Ruth worked with the same quiet determination. She never assumed that yesterday's kindness guaranteed tomorrow's privilege. She arrived early. She labored faithfully. She asked for nothing beyond the opportunity to gather what remained. Boaz noticed not only her diligence, but her character. Kindness is easy to display for a single afternoon. Faithfulness reveals itself over time. The workers also began to know her. She greeted others with humility, shared burdens without complaint, and treated every handful of grain as a gift rather than a right. Slowly, the whispers about the Moabite woman gave way to something different: respect. Meanwhile, Naomi watched these events unfold with thoughtful eyes. The bitterness that had weighed upon her heart had not disappeared overnight, but hope was beginning to loosen grief's grip. For the first time in many years, she found herself thinking not only about survival, but about the future. One evening, after they had finished their simple meal, Naomi spoke. "My daughter," she said gently, "should I not seek a home for you where it may be well with you?" Ruth 3, verse 1. The words carried deep affection. Naomi was no longer thinking only as a grieving widow. She was thinking as a mother. She reminded Ruth that Boaz was one of their family redeemers. According to Israelite custom, a close relative could redeem family property and, under certain circumstances, marry the widow of a deceased relative to preserve the family line. This practice reflected a commitment to family responsibility, though each situation depended on the willingness of those involved. The barley harvest was drawing to its close. That night, Boaz would be winnowing grain on the threshing floor. After the harvest, workers often remained beside the grain overnight to guard it from thieves or animals. The threshing floor was usually an open, elevated place where the evening breeze helped separate the valuable grain from the light chaff. Naomi carefully explained what Ruth should do. She was not asking Ruth to deceive Boaz or to act improperly. Rather, she was instructing her to make a humble appeal according to a custom that both would understand. Ruth listened without interruption. Then she answered with the same simple faith that had marked every step of her journey. "All that you say I will do." Ruth 3, verse 5. Night descended over Bethlehem. The heat of the day faded, replaced by a cool breeze flowing across the hills. Above, the sky stretched endlessly, filled with stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. On the threshing floor, the day's work had ended. The grain had been tossed into the evening wind. The heavier kernels had fallen back to the ground, while the useless chaff drifted into the darkness. When the work was finished, Boaz shared a meal with his servants. His heart was content after a successful harvest, and before long he lay down near the pile of grain to sleep. Everything grew still. Only the whisper of the wind moved through the fields. With quiet, careful steps, Ruth approached. There was no boldness in her movements, no attempt to draw attention to herself. She simply did as Naomi had instructed. The Bible describes the moment with remarkable restraint. Ruth uncovered Boaz's feet and lay down. Ruth 3, verse 7. In the cool night air, this respectful gesture would eventually awaken him. Around midnight, Boaz suddenly stirred. Startled, he sat upright. A figure was lying near his feet. "Who are you?" he asked into the darkness. Ruth answered softly, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your garment over your servant, for you are a redeemer." Ruth 3, verse 9. In the culture of ancient Israel, spreading one's garment over another symbolized protection, covenant, and acceptance. Ruth was not making a romantic speech. She was respectfully asking Boaz whether he would fulfill the responsibility that belonged to a family redeemer. For a brief moment, the night seemed to hold its breath. Everything now depended on Boaz's answer. He could refuse. He could remind her that she was still a Moabite. He could send her away before dawn. Instead, his voice was filled with warmth and honor. "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. Do not fear." Ruth 3, verse 10 to 11. Yet Boaz was also an honest man. He explained that although he was indeed a redeemer, there was another relative who was even closer according to the law. That man had the first right to redeem the family. Boaz would not ignore what was right, even for something he deeply desired. If he will redeem you, good. But if he is not willing, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Ruth 3, verse 13. His promise rested not only on emotion, but on integrity. Before dawn, while darkness still covered the hills, Boaz filled Ruth's cloak with 6 measures of barley and sent her home. It was another quiet act of generosity, another sign that neither Ruth nor Naomi had been forgotten. As Ruth walked back through the sleeping town, the heavy grain rested in her arms, but something even greater rested in her heart. For the first time since she had left Moab, the future no longer seemed hidden behind a wall of uncertainty. Morning was coming, and with it a decision that would change not only her life, but the history of generations yet to be unborn.